So what is happening to the baby? So scientifically, when a miscarriage happens, and then I want you to answer what could possibly happen to the mother. I read that a mother can get a special type of like blood pressure where it can cause them to get a stroke.
Okay, so
I learned that. I mean, it's a painful experience. So I can imagine all the things that are going wrong. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, so let's talk about the science about it.
yeah. Okay, so if we talk about miscarriages, and first of all, start off by giving the strict definition of a miscarriage. So miscarriage is a natural termination of a pregnancy that occurs anywhere from 0 weeks to 23 weeks and 6 days, and that's in the UK. So I think every country has their own threshold for or cutoff point for at what point it's no longer considered a miscarriage. And there are a variety of different reasons why a miscarriage might occur, or why a natural termination of a pregnancy might occur. And we can go through those each and kind of look at those ones. But then I also just want to say that there are actually also a huge number of reasons why miscarriages can occur, and we don't actually know. And I think in these cases, for the women themselves, it's the most frustrating and difficult one to deal with. When you don't have a definitive answer for anything, it's really difficult to be able to deal with. But I think where miscarriage is something that is hugely sensitive, not being given an answer as to why it's happened, and then not knowing what you can do in the future to reduce those chances, just makes it even more difficult to deal with, right? So there isn't always an answer, but sometimes there is, and we can go through some of those. So in general, I want to say that a miscarriage usually occurs when there is a complication that means that the pregnancy either isn't and wasn't viable, or that impedes the growth of the pregnancy. So something like a genetic abnormality can cause a miscarriage. And usually when there's a genetic abnormality, it means that the pregnancy wasn't viable, which means that it was never going to survive to create a fully functioning, grown, healthy baby. And so either this can mean that the genetic abnormalities would lead to heart defects, and so the heart never develops properly, and the circulation therefore is compromised, and so the baby cannot develop. Or abnormalities in the brain, which means that the baby cannot develop properly. And so essentially, at some point, the growth stops to continue. And once the growing baby essentially is no longer alive, your body recognizes that and will naturally remove the pregnancy. And so that will come out as a miscarriage. And in those instances, I think every miscarriage is really difficult for a woman. In those instances, it is an abnormality that would have meant that the baby would have never made it to full term, and would have never come out a healthy, functioning baby. But even though, you can tell yourself that this was never going to be, I still feel that every miscarriage is really difficult for a woman to deal with. The second one that we can touch on is hormonal related problems. And this one usually occurs, the frequency of hormonal related issues is higher in people who have irregular periods. So your periods are regulated by fluctuations in different hormones that happens at different times throughout your cycle. And like this synchrony will lead to different events. So when your egg is released, when you have shedding of your uterus lining, which is what a period is, and things like that. And those hormones being in good synchrony means essentially that your hormones are being released at the right time.
Yeah.
When they aren't released in good synchrony, it means that you have really irregular periods. Well, that's how it shows up. But it pertains towards this idea that there is an issue with the release and the synchrony of different hormones. When you've become pregnant, your body still relies on release of certain hormones in order to maintain the pregnancy. And so if you are someone who already has an issue with the synchrony of different hormones, and this issue continues when you have a pregnancy, then what it means is that the fetus doesn't develop properly, and so you are at risk or at higher risk of a miscarriage. So if you are someone who has really irregular periods, or particularly painful periods, or abnormalities in your menstrual cycle in general, then I would really encourage you to investigate that with a gynecologist to see how that might affect fertility and to see how that might affect pregnancy as well, just so that you can be in a position where you are already informed of what might occur trying to get pregnant and becoming pregnant. Blood circulation issues is also something that can occur in pregnancies. So people who might be at a higher risk of developing blood clots or a really high blood pressure, anything that affects circulation can affect a pregnancy, because the growing baby relies on a good supply of blood, because that's how it gets oxygen, right? So if you form a blood clot that then reduces the blood supply to a child or to a growing baby or to your pregnancy, then this can essentially cause the pregnancy to die, and then your body will expel it in a miscarriage once it recognizes that the pregnancy has been terminated. And so if there are any signs that something has changed within your pregnancy, I would really encourage people to absolutely follow their instincts and follow up on that change, whether that would be that you previously felt movement and then you no longer felt movement. Any sign that you feel that your pregnancy is declining in its health, I would investigate that, because like we've discussed, it could be a variety of reasons, but that could also be circulatory issues. And if it is a circulation issue, then that might be something that's reversible and so can be saved. Whereas something like genetic abnormalities cannot really be saved, right? And then also things that can arise like infections. So infections, when it's just you know, it's up to your immune system to be able to fight it. When you have a pregnancy with a developing immune system, an infection might be something that's a lot more dangerous in those cases. And your own immune system while you are pregnant is also dampened, because what you don't want is for your body to recognize your pregnancy as something foreign and attack it. So your immune system kind of relaxes a little bit so that it doesn't attack the pregnancy. And so you yourself now are more vulnerable if an infection occurs, and the baby is also really vulnerable because its immune system is obviously developing. So something like a serious infection can both cause fatality of the pregnancy and fatality for the pregnant woman themselves. So there are lots and lots of different reasons why miscarriages can occur, and they are surprisingly common. They occur in about 1 in 4 pregnancies, so 25%. But just because they're common and just because there are a lot of scientific reasons for why they happen doesn't mean that it's any more easy for a woman to deal with. I think it's always difficult and always tragic, but I think at least having an understanding of how prevalent they are and having an understanding of why sometimes they can occur, especially from a younger age before you're already in the thick of your pregnancy, might be something that helps to manage expectations, and might be something that helps you to understand that if it does happen, that you're certainly not the only one.
Shirley Bekker, man, again, with the dope, concise, concrete, scientific explanations. I'm telling you, you need to get in the classroom. Whenever you get that first $1 million, I want you to just go to my school. You know, all I need you to do is just be a substitute for just a couple of weeks. I promise you, it'll be amazing. It's like, no, I'm just playing. But I mean, it's a lot of ambiguity. You know, it's a lot of. So where do we fall short in sex education? You know, with learning and understanding this.
I think we fall short, at least in the UK. I can speak on, because that's where I've received sex education.
Yeah, go ahead.
absolutely all fronts, to be completely honest.
Yeah, raise the roof for that one. You got to raise the roof for that one. Because there's some people that don't even get it. So the fact that you got it.
There are some people who never receive sex education, right? And I think a lot of people have the classic experience of like, scientifically, this is what sex is. Sex can result in pregnancy, and wear a condom. End of story. As if it's taboo.
Don't get an STD.
That people are not going to engage. And I think the more we shy away from sex education, the more that people will engage in sex incorrectly, right? But even just to speak really quickly on, because I think at school, sex education is targeted at preventing people from having sex. I think the way they teach sex education is like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. But if you do, wear a condom, because you will get pregnant, because you will get pregnant. And I wonder to what extent sending out that message subconsciously allows women to grow up with this idea that you should get pregnant as soon as you have sex. And then when they do grow up and they start to they presumably would have had sex already, but when they do grow up and they start to try to have a family, when they don't immediately fall pregnant, they start thinking that something is wrong with them, or that they are one of the only women who struggles to get pregnant. And I really wonder to what extent, like, the way we teach sex education gives women this false perception that pregnancy is something that automatically occurs when you try, when actually it's really difficult to get pregnant, because your fertile window is actually only once you ovulate, which is a very small window within a month. But that's even if everything else is perfect. Then there are people who have irregular periods. Then there are people who suffer from PCOS and don't actually produce mature eggs all the time. And there are so many other complications that go into place. So I really wonder, apart from the fact that we do sex education a disservice, the way we speak about it, whether that feeds into the misconceptions people have around being able to get pregnant. But yeah, that's just a side thing.
It always comes down to the teacher, right? I remember when I was first learning about HIV and they were saying how you can get it from blood transfusions. And I thought that if you touch somebody's blood, then you got HIV. Like, that is how. But I think you're right. It's just like the intent is not intentional or genuine, if that makes any sense, right? The intent is like, don't do it for religious purposes. Don't do it because, like, that's never explicitly said, right? It's just don't do it. And like, what does reverse psychology do? Every time you tell me you don't do it, I'm going to want to do it, So obviously, and if I'm not really listening to you, I'm going to do it the wrong way. And
that's exactly it. I think we really need to move away from sex education being a way to scare people. Just teach them as much as possible so that they have access to all the correct information to make wise decisions. And I definitely think that sex education should encompass things like infections, but not just sexually transmitted infections, because sexual education is about reproductive health and genital health in general as well. So vaginal infections that aren't sexually transmitted, because again, to what extent, when they do say wear a condom because you can get an infection, it gives people this perception that any infection of the genitals came because you had lots and lots and lots of dirty sex. I want to completely break down. For one, it only takes sexual contact with one person that's infected, if it is a sexually transmitted disease, to get it yourself. So this idea that like the people who have sexually transmitted diseases or infections are the people who've had the most sex. It can be a virgin that has sex for the first time with someone who has an infection, but then gets the infection, right? But apart from that, there are a huge number of infections that don't occur from sexual transmission, but actually just because you've done something that's changed the balance of like the microorganisms that live in or on your genitals. So if we speak for women, because I'm interested in OBGYN, for example, so vaginas are supposed to have bacteria and fungus, microorganisms living in them. And they live kind of in like a good balance with each other to keep a pH at around 4.4, which is like a little bit acidic essentially. And when you change that balance for any reason, then one of them outgrows the other. And this is how you can get common infections, including bacterial vaginosis, so BV, or something like thrush. So I made a video once on vaginal infections, and I kind of put a preview on my Instagram story, and I got quite a few males actually that said, yeah, Shirley, you need to tell those women about their stinky about their stinky vaginas, because they don't know how to take care of themselves. They need to learn how to wash and clean. And I wasn't surprised by that reaction, because a lot of people think like, if you've got an infection, you're dirty. Whereas something like thrush, the people who get thrush are the people who use soaps, who douche, who wash too much and get rid of the bacteria. And so now what you have is an overgrowth of fungus. And it's that leads to a yeast infection. So, and then the opposite is true for bacterial vaginosis. If you do a lot to get rid of the fungus, then you get an overgrowth of bacteria, and that's why it's called bacterial vaginosis. So I really want to sort of shoot down a lot of these misconceptions, but I think that should start from sex education. Otherwise you get a generation that grows up thinking any infection of the genitals is sexual, and people are dirty if they have them. It's like, no, you can literally have a course of antibiotics to treat an infection of your gums, and that can give you thrush, because the antibiotics will also kill the bacteria in your vagina. And so once you've killed those, then you get thrush, then you get, fungus overgrowth and thrush. And so I really want to contribute towards, dispelling myths.
It's like education could have solved so many things. Like the scientific method could have solved this whole COVID problem. Like if we understood the scientific method, we would have had just so much, just grace with all these scientists this year. And the same thing with sex ed, But I think also we don't teach that science isn't perfect, like science is ever growing, and it's only as good as the most recent paper, right? And you have to always update depending on the times, because the times change. And yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you.
No, I think what you said is completely valid. And I think, to be honest, that perhaps people should make a concerted effort to be more transparent about the fact that science isn't perfect. Because I think sometimes scientists don't really want to admit that it's perfect in fear of making people mistrust them. But I think actually it's having the opposite effect. People acting like science is always right, science is always perfect. And then later on down the line, we find out that something went wrong or someone was wrong, is exactly what feeds into people's mistrust. So I think if we were all just more transparent about what we understand, I won't say what we know, what we understand as facts, and what we are still researching, or what potentially we maybe haven't considered, then people would trust it a bit more, But yeah, I do think that maybe there is an issue with the transparency of how much we don't know sometimes, or the fact that science isn't perfect, as you said.
What's some cool YouTube videos you got coming up?
So I actually want to make a video. I'm really excited about making this video, because so far I think I've focused a lot on gynecology, kind of related things, but I'm not forgetting the obstetrics, and I want to focus on postpartum mental disorders, because I think mental health is something that's really interesting. Because I think as much as we are moving into a space where we are considering mental health more and more and more, I do still think that it still isn't being treated on par with physical health by any means. The brain is so fragile and susceptible to changes. If there are any chemicals, any hormones, anything around that can bind to receptors in our brain and change our cognition. And so in a way, mental health there is a physical basis to mental health when it comes to looking like at our brain, or zooming into our brains. So they are very real within after pregnancy. There's postpartum depression that people know about, but there's also something called baby blues. There's also something called postpartum psychosis, where you get psychotic symptoms. And so I want to make a video to break those down and investigate those.
Yeah, that's dope. That's really dope. That's really dope. Excellent. You are definitely a pioneer. You solving all the problems that is definitely necessary. And I think that's why we get along so much, because we just want to problem solve, right? We want to take our expertise and teach it to the world. So what's some cool things or other things you got coming up, and then where can they find you again, Ms. Bekker?
Okay, so in terms of anything that I've got coming up, so everything really related to obstetrics and gynecology, I probably have on my list somewhere that I want to like investigate. So apart from the postpartum mental health disorders, I also just want to look at different types of pregnancy complications, such as preeclampsia or gestational diabetes or whatever. But in terms of where you can find that, youtube.com/Shirley Bekker, so just my full name, is the platform where I strictly stick to science stuff, and that's where I would recommend you go if that's what you're interested in.
And then before we close, I actually have a question about just the postpartum, that concept. What is the science behind, like, when you're learning about it? What are they telling you, like, the causes of that?
Yeah, so again, when it comes to anything to do with mental health, the way we think, the way we speak, the way we operate in any way, it all comes down to neuroscience and the neurology of our brain, and how different parts of our brains communicate with each other. And there are particular areas of our brain that's responsible for mood. And so these moods are under the control of different hormones. So I think a lot of people have heard of the hormone called serotonin, for example, and your levels of serotonin can affect your mood. But then there are also other hormones that aren't strictly in the brain, but released elsewhere in your body for other reasons, that can actually affect your levels of hormones that are important for your mood and in your brain. So if we speak about serotonin, we know that if you have low serotonin levels, you experience a low mood, right? But then what some people might not know is that the hormone estrogen is something that is being actually currently researched on the links of estrogen and its effects on your levels of serotonin. Now, estrogen is a hormone that's prevalent in the female reproductive system, and going from being pregnant to then suddenly not being pregnant, there will be a huge fluctuation in your estrogen levels. And so it's unsurprising then that can have an impact on your mood. So in terms of like why these things occur, it all comes down to fluctuation in hormone levels, and that then either directly impacts the areas in your brain responsible for mood, or indirectly impact the areas by interacting with other hormones and changing their levels. So that's why I say, like, although it's mental health, there's a physical basis that's going on. There are actually chemicals that are causing these changes in your mood. And it's not just that you're crazy, or that, that you're exaggerating, that physically there is something going on to cause these symptoms. So I think, when it comes to these things, it's important to recognize them and address them, and not feel, just because you aren't physically dying, to not feel that there's a reason to address it. So if I quickly just bullet point, something like baby blues is something that occurs really early after giving birth, and this is something that it gives you mild depressive symptoms and will resolve itself within a matter of a few days. So this is like less of an emergency. And then everyone is quite familiar with postpartum depression, and this can occur from 2 weeks up to 4 weeks after giving birth, and this is a more moderate, low-level depressive symptoms that can occur. And if you are experiencing that, there are actual drugs that you can be prescribed to intervene. So maybe something like selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors to make sure that the serotonin levels don't drop. So antidepressants in general. And then the good thing about going to the doctor is that they can make sure that whatever you're taking is safe if you're breastfeeding, safe after you've just given birth, and all of this stuff. And then I think less commonly known, postpartum psychosis, in which people experience psychotic symptoms of mania, and then symptoms of depression as well. And so they might start actually having auditory and visual hallucinations. and like psychotic episodes essentially, and mania, having like racing thoughts and being really fidgety, having a high heart rate, and then depressive symptoms, so a low mood. And if you're experiencing that, which can occur sort of in the first 2 weeks after giving birth, it's actually considered a medical emergency. And so that's definitely something that you shouldn't ignore if you're having hallucinations, if you're having mania after giving birth, because the longer you leave it, the more it worsens, and it can worsen up to a point where you end up harming yourself or harming the baby. So there are people who've experienced this mental disorder and gone on to kill their baby, but it was a mental disorder. So yeah, I definitely think that people should be aware so that they don't just think, I must just be crazy, you know? There is something actually going on and something you can do about it.
Do you think that's like the same science as it relates to animals who eat their babies?
I think when animals eat their babies, people have investigated this also and written scientific papers and teach about this also. When animals eat their babies, I think there are actually other things that go on, especially because animals that aren't domesticated live in a very, they function in a very, all we need to do is make sure that we put out babies so we continue a progeny, and do the best we can to make sure that the baby is viable, survives, and is strong to carry on the progeny even further. And so animals have this instinct of, if their baby is born, so a hamster, for example, I'll say an example that's true for a hamster. If the baby is born and their baby makes contact with someone other than the mother up until a certain age, then there is an instinctual response within the mother hamster that that baby is then harmed in a way that they are no longer viable and that they're no longer going to grow up to be strong and pass on the genes. And so in that instance, the mother sees it as more advantageous to just eat the baby hamster rather than let it continue to grow and not be strong and viable. So with animals, there's a whole different mechanism going on, but I would say that animals operate in a very more pre-programmed way sometimes than humans do, because humans can communicate. They have different areas in their brain that is responsible for reasoning in a completely different way.
But we act like that as humans, though, sometimes. Like, we don't eat our kids, but we treat our kids like, you're the strongest kid, you're the weakest kid.
Yeah.
Like this kid. And it probably does the same thing, but that's a whole nother podcast. I am super, super blessed to have Shirley Bekker, the Shirley Bekker, coming through with all the science knowledge. She's going to be the best OBGYN in not only the UK, but in the world, because she not only knows the science, but she has an amazing heart that's going to touch everybody. And I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Blessing me, girl. You do not understand. I need to get you in the classroom.
Thank you so much for having me again. Honestly, it's an honor every time we communicate. So thank you for the opportunity and the platform.
Was it better than the second time, or was it just its own little thing?
Yeah, both of them are their own unique experiences because we covered different topics. So, but obviously where I'm super interested in OBGYN things, this is the direction I want my life to go in. So this was particularly exciting for me.
So next time I want to get you on and another healthcare professional, and we should do some more like I would love for you to feature one of like your postpartum like that video and just like talk about when you did it, what was the reactions, and maybe have somebody else come on and talk about maybe something. I would love that. Would you be interested in that?
That would be really fun. I would love that, to dive into like one topic deeply that might help a lot of people. I would love to.
Bet. Well, I appreciate you so much, Ms. Bekker. Always blessing me. I know it's like 7 o'clock over there, so make sure you get some rest, please. Y'all don't celebrate Martin Luther King Day, right?
No.
Oh man, R.I.P. Martin Luther King. But go ahead. What'd you say?
We don't specifically celebrate it. There might be some schools that would particularly recognize it, but it's not like a national. Got it.
I thought you had a 3-day weekend like we did, but it's all good. Make sure you get some rest today. What do you got planned for tomorrow?
Sorry?
I said, what do you have planned for tomorrow?
Probably just another day of studying. It's like every day looks pretty much the same and they all kind of blend into one, but it's fine. We've got to do it to qualify, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. Just make sure you just, get on Clubhouse just a little bit, just so you can, relax and then get back to studying.
Definitely, 100%.
Absolutely. Do y'all do like study groups on Clubhouse? Have you met any? I don't
No, but I'd be interested if they did. I would probably join if they did and we were studying the same sort of topics. I'd probably join that.
Yeah. That I was in this one group where it was like it was a scenario room where it was like a specific medical profile, and all the doctors were like saying what they would do after this, after this, after this, after that. You know what
That's
I'm talking about?
That's pretty sick. Yeah, I can
Yeah,
imagine it would be just like a patient presents with this, blah, they
yeah,
have this, they're allergic to this medicine, blah, 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 blah. Like, what's the first thing you would do and how would you manage it? It
yeah,
sounds a lot like the exam I'm going to have to take as final. So I would probably join those rooms so I can like pick up a few gems.
yeah. Absolutely. Did I share you the good news that I got?
No, I don't think so. It depends on what the good news is, but
Oh, it's great news. No, but so I got so I'm certified to teach science in Michigan, but now I'm certified to teach math now. So I'm going to be teaching like math and calculus and all that stuff.
so
So
you yourself are a progeny of like all sciences and maths. That's awesome.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, physics is like my love, and I love math. But yeah, that's why I can have this conversation with you and like just appreciate everything you're saying, because it's definitely
Congratulations. That's so awesome.
yeah. So I just want to share that with you. I appreciate the love, and yeah, we gonna keep working. I want to put you on the platform that you deserve to be on. And again, all I need is 25 cents. Just give me the quarter, and I'll be straight. Okay, be straight with the quarter. All right.
No worries. Once I get my million, you'll get your quarter.
All
Okay.
right, I'm gonna hold you to that. I'm gonna hold you to that. All right, I'm gonna hold you to that. Bet. All right, then, Miss Shirley Bekker, thank you so much for coming on T Simple Podcast. Peace out.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.